Good afternoon. I'm Mary Ellen Iskenderian. I'm the president of Women's World Banking. We're a global microfinance network, and I am absolutely delighted to be addressing you here today on the topic of financial services for the poor. But as my fellow panel members and I have been talking in the last few days, this whole conference, or much of this conference, has really been focused on financial services not necessarily being the entire part of the story in terms of service delivery to the poor. And I think you've got a wonderful set of panelists today to talk about different approaches and different deliveries for different services that go hand in hand alongside financing. But perhaps as a bit of a backdrop, I can tell you some of the trends that we are seeing in terms of financial services, and I will shamelessly use my own organization as a demonstrator of that. We are seeing an enormous trend towards commercialization, both in terms of the sources of financing as well as in the way our organizations are working. Women's World Banking is a global network of 24 microfinance institutions and then another 24 commercial banks that are doing microfinance. And we're now seeing, again, at least in our network, that more than 50% of their financing is coming from commercial debt, with savings making up a growing percentage of that balance. And at least in most of our leading networks, and this is across regions, Latin America, the Middle East, Asia, we're seeing grant funding going right down to 1% to 2% of their funding in a year. And I was in India a few weeks ago and had a wonderful conversation with a local equity fund, a local microfinance equity fund in India, Bellwether. And they were noting that there is a direct correlation. The high performers in their funds are the ones that have no longer any grant funding in their operations. So you're really seeing just a tremendous increase in the commercial push and in commercial operation of financing and microfinance, at least. We've seen from 2004 to 2005, commercial funding of all types go from close to $5 billion a year to $7.3 billion a year. And this is for all sorts of different purposes, both technical services as well as direct financing. And last year, FDI, foreign direct investment in microfinance, doubled in the 1 year. So there's just a tremendous tsunami headed this way. But as I mentioned, that financing is not the only part of the picture. And I think over the course of this last day and a half, we've heard that pretty consistently to people from other speakers. So you've got a tremendous panel here who are offering lots of different delivery channels and delivery mechanisms, and I'm going to turn the floor over to the first of those, Fola Adeola, who is chairman and founder of Fate Foundation in Nigeria, and as I can testify, he's also co-founder of one of the best private commercial banks in Nigeria, Guaranty Trust. So Fola, do you want to tell us a little bit about your operations?
Thank you, Mary. I sat at my desk, and each time I needed 25 people, new employees, I got applications from 3,000 people. And then we created hurdles upon hurdles upon hurdles. You know, come and take an exam, come and do this. And at the end of the day, I asked myself, where do the rest go? And we started to think. We came to the conclusion that we could prove that entrepreneurship was a compelling alternative to employment, and only businesses create jobs, okay? That was a plank on which we set out Fate Foundation. Now, in the last 1.5 days, people have described the poor in their own various forms. I'll tell you who we're addressing. We're addressing only college graduates. We're not looking at the poor in the rural areas. We're looking at college graduates, and we've put a structure in place to get them to set up their own businesses and run their own businesses. The model is very simple. We have a classroom setting, not an MBA class, where we take you through basic business. What is inventory? What is receivable? What is cash? What is conversion cycle? If you sell on credit, what does it mean for your business? And we bring to that classroom people who actually do business on a daily basis. That lasts for 5 months. And then, while that is going on, we attach them to mentors, people who have done things successfully, believing that between people and success sometimes is who you find to inspire you. And the third leg of our program is a loan support scheme. There is a fourth leg. If all the 3 legs go well, we then have what we call post-setting up business consulting. All these, the consulting is just to ensure that you continue to do business on the basis of best practices, your accounting system, your HR system, and so on and so forth. And all this, even after, is at cost, at bare cost to the participant. We call them participants. That's what we do. In 7 years, those who never did business before, who just came out of college or university, that we have taken on 1,100 to date. Those who have been struggling with their businesses, who were not prepared for business before they went in there, 9,000 people. We have a 650-member alumni today. Now, the downside of the model is that we hardly have enough money to assist those who want to set up business, to set up their businesses. One, we decided that we will not invest in any of those businesses because we felt ethically that would be wrong. Okay. We've worked with IFC over the last 5 years on different programs. And currently we have an interesting one where we have a lending organization, we have IFC, and then we have the participant, we have Faith Foundation. And you can think of 3 circles, and at a point they all converge, and that's where we put the participant. IFC is going to guarantee 50% of the fund or of the loan that is extended to a faith participant or a faith graduate, if you want to call the person that. And what does faith do? We continue to handhold that business person, that new business person, through this business and ensure that not other than business decisions, not many things go wrong in terms of poor management of that business. I can leave this, it's 8 minutes, and whichever way you want to take it further, I can explain. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Next up, we have Lynn Pickholtz, who's the president of ShoreCap Exchange, and Lynn is very graciously stepping in for Laurie Spengler from Shorebank, and I'm sure she's going to have a lot to say to us about the technical services that they provide to microfinance institutions and banks in which they invest.
Thank you. So I'm delighted to be here. And it's absolutely wonderful to be on a panel with both Reem, who we've heard so much about, and Fola. And quite ironically, one of Shorebank's international companies, there's 3. There's a consulting company, there's the capacity building, not-for-profit, which I manage, and there's an investment company, which is called ShoreCap International. One of our latest investments was in Reliance in the Gambia, and it was actually two startup Gambian entrepreneurs who left their bank to start up a financial institution to address underserved markets, both microfinance and small business. And one of the people who inspired them to leave their banks was actually Fola, who met them at a coffee house somewhere in London, and I think gave them the courage to really take that step to start the organization. So it's so fantastic to be with you on the panel. And Babukara and Ismailia are true energetic entrepreneurs that we're delighted to be working with. So on the plane last night, just filling in for Laurie, I was thinking, what am I going to speak about today? And I thought, well, there's 3 things that I thought were worth mentioning. One, there's so much talk now about microfinance. What are some of the other critical gaps to address finance for the poor, and what kind of microfinance? The second thing is that there's always so much a focus on finance and financial return, yet we all know that to grow small businesses, and especially fast-growing small businesses, these financial institutions aren't that small, but they have many of the same issues, and they need a capital plus approach. They don't just need finance, they need a lot of other things. And as they grow faster, they focus very much on their portfolios. And what about their IT system, which handled 3,000, which now needs to handle 10, 20, and 100,000 borrowers? Internal audit, risk management, governance. Human resources never keeps up with the pace. So you generally find, and I believe this was one of the presentations yesterday, that talent and management capacity is one of the scarcest resources. And so all this money going into the financial side and demanding a return, and often not at all enough focus on the capacity building side, and at that how to design cost-effective and accountable capacity building using many of the same business principles that we apply to capital, but not getting the social return, not getting the financial return as directly, but absolutely leveraging your capital investment so that you are, in fact, getting the return that's embedded into the system, as well as hugely with human capital. Just to go on to something about the critical gaps in microfinance. There are about 10,000 microfinance institutions in the world now. I thought that was a huge amount until it was Steve who said, well, there are 12,000 Starbucks, and then I thought, well, are there enough microfinance institutions? But that's a lot of microfinance institutions, very fragmented, very dispersed. And so when a new one's going to start up, one needs to question, and there's 74 microfinance investment vehicles that probably in the next year are going to put on, together with the international financial institutions, around $4 billion. A little bit more than half of that is from non-private investors, and 75% of that is for debt and 25% for equity. So immediately you see that all these investment funds going after microfinance institutions are mainly debt-focused, and then the 25% that are equity-focused are focusing to a large extent on greenfield startups. 75% of that money, which is about half a billion, is focused on startup institutions in a lot of these countries, which are initiated and run often by Westerners. And I think that a huge gap in the market is the second-tier financial institutions, which cannot offer 10 to 20% returns within a 7-year period with an exit. Yet it is local entrepreneurs who completely committed to poverty, who've made a huge difference, are serving large numbers of customers, and are largely getting ignored by the market. That's not to say there aren't some players, even in this room, but generally second-tier financial institutions are not getting the attention that they should be getting, and locally owned and managed institutions are also not getting the attention that they should be getting. In terms of products, I think there's an increasing focus now on savings, and savings is often, for the very poor, more important than credit. I remember the first time I was in Bangladesh, and I've probably been there about 14 times since. A little shop owner in Dhaka told me that these poor customers come to him and pay him 1% to look after their savings, because there's no other safe and convenient place to do it. And when I spoke to one of the savers who went to that person, they said, you know, I choose to go hungry on some days so that I can save for an emergency situation, so that there's some economic resilience. So savings is a huge area where I think deserves a lot of attention when one's focusing on microfinance institutions. And then the whole focus on microfinance and the close tie to poverty alleviation. And I'm a great supporter of microfinance. Some of our partners are microfinance institutions, but most microfinance entities are retail, and they tend to redistribute money within a locality. So if there's one tailor and you finance a second tailor, people don't have more clothes to sew up. They'll stop going to the tailor that has a dirty place and, you know, not the most fancy new sewing machines. They'll go to the new tailor, and money gets redistributed. So the tailor that lost business fires a worker, and the tailor that just got the loan and bought the sewing machines hires a worker. So that's not to say redistribution in a local area is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But if it's a local area with more concentrated poverty, what you want to do is increase the balance sheet of that local community, and you want to bring in new income. And it's a small percentage of microfinance institutions that manage to do that. And a largely ignored part of the market are small business banks. And all the philanthropists, I won't say all, but a lot of them can't see as easily the poverty face because it's not a poor entrepreneur. The small business owner is a slightly better off entrepreneur, but the job creation and wealth creation ability of those small businesses is important. And I think it's a false divide between micro and small. It's all along the spectrum, and I think much more attention needs to be on the small business. And the last point, just in terms of where the gap is on the market side, is that getting local capital markets to work and provide debt is really important, and not having currency risk for these institutions. On the capacity building side, the company that I run is SureCap Exchange. It works very closely with SureCap International, and we do the capacity building of about 12 small business banks and microfinance institutions. And one of the most effective mechanisms we've found for capacity building is, in fact, and I think this group more than anyone knows that, is peer learning and networking. We saw it in Shorebank, which is our parent company, which has been around for about 30 years and grew from 40 million to 2 billion and focused only on economically distressed areas in the United States. One of their major product lines is supporting African-American entrepreneurs who are often former bus drivers and teachers and anything but skilled rehabbers to improve local housing stock. And these rehabbers used to come together at Shorebank and talk about the boilers that were exploding and who the best plumbers are and how to restore and revitalize old housing stock so you could make it available for low-income households. They were true entrepreneurs, even though it was rehabber lending. And what we've done at SureCap Exchange is we're now running 3 forums for peers in the banks that we're supporting, one for human resource managers, one for lenders, one for risk managers, and for CEOs. And we do them both in person and on the telephone. And it's quite unbelievable the kind of trust and peer learning and camaraderie. A lot of these entrepreneurs, especially the CEOs, are very lonely in these organizations. And they're all facing the same issues. And the human resource managers, the conversations, the first few times start up on how do you identify leadership and how do you stop retention. But as they build trust, you get the questions like, well, I'm really powerless in my organization. The CEO doesn't really care about human resources. We don't play a strategic function. How do we change and build that? And so we found that bringing people together, both, we got an event coming up in South Africa, in person and over the phone, has been a very effective channel. We've learned a ton of lessons about cost-effective technical assistance delivery, made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I'll just stop there, and if there are questions about that, I'll surely answer.
And then our last panelist is Nanavaty, who's the Director for Economic and Rural Development for SEWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association in India, who's offering a completely different set of services to the members of her network. And so I turn the floor to you, Reema. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be at this forum. It's my first time being here, and it's been a very learning and an enriching experience. Today I represent before you the 963,000 women members, all working women at SEWA. We are the women of SEWA who have confronted poverty, very often dire poverty, and yet have transformed our lives and livelihoods. Since 1972, when SEWA was first founded or began, we've established new economic institutions, which includes a SEWA bank, a SEWA Trade Facilitation Center, an insurance agency, members own, more than 32,000 members own economic organizations, a housing unit. And through these new economic institutions, we have changed the social relationships and developed successful models for the future growth of our country, but also models which will ensure women's participation in the future growth of our country. The poor and the women in India, as our experience shows, may not have the money for a decent living. Maybe regular food, children's education, and a proper house of their own. But they do have skills and know-how, and to design and launch their own economic institutions. And at SEWA, we harness this strength of our members to set up our own economic institutions. And our experience has been that once given an entry into the market, women can and do run these institutions on market principles. In a very real sense, poor women in countries like ours are the untapped human capital, and their financial sustainability is our country's future. The profiles of the women workers that I'm talking about are vendors and hawkers, women who earn their living by vending fruits or vegetables or small miscellaneous cutlery items on the streets. These are home-based workers, women who earn their living by stitching garments or old clothes in the homes, or by rolling incense sticks or Indian cigars, which we call it as bidi, or these are artisans and embroidery workers, or women who provide manual labor and services, which are agriculture workers, small and marginal farmers, forest workers, or salt farmers, or construction workers. And the fourth category, which is emerging in India, is that of producers, women who just not invest their own labor, but they also invest their own small capital in producing things, and then try to also market it. And at SEWA, we strive to seek full employment and self-reliance for these women workers. And by full employment and self-reliance, we try to seek work and income security for our members and access to basic supportive services, which is healthcare, childcare, nutrition, and shelter. And we at SEWA call this as livelihood finance, which ensures livelihood security to our members. We also, from our experience, feel that poverty is also a form of violence, and it snatches away the freedom of expression and choice. It denies education and erodes the self-confidence of the women, and also defines very often poor are especially women are defined as passive and ill-suited to the pursuit of equality. And we strive to bring a new definition to the informal sector women workers. And we at SEWA try to address these corrosive effects of poverty with an integrated approach. And this is organizing to increase the collective strength and the bargaining power of the women workers, capacity building, both in terms of leadership, managerial, and financial and administrative capacities, and capital formation resulting into assets, resulting into access to tools and equipments, and social security. And these four components are the pillars on which we build our members' own economic institutions, which equip them in their fight against poverty. But our experience also shows that the four stand together, not linear or parallel. They all have to go simultaneously, but at the pace at which the poor and the women are able to absorb it. And this in itself becomes an empowering process for the poor and the women workers. At SEWA, we always believe that the government, poor alone cannot fight their battle against poverty, and therefore government has to be a partner in our struggle against poverty. And we try to identify the issues and needs and link it up with the government programs, and sometimes also help create more programs. But we also believe in the primacy of local ownership and knowledge of the communities around which the programs have to be built. And therefore, from the very beginning, we have spearhead teams, which are the local leaders' own teams which are groomed to become the managers for the planning and implementation. And when poor grow, nobody is happy. And so far in this journey of these last 3 decades, we have grown with the partnerships with the government. But when poor grow and gain strength, they also welcome a lot of brutality, and they also become threats for the government. And when we are small, everybody is happy as a demonstrative example. But when it grows, they also become a political and a power base. And therefore, SEWA is now at a cross-section where we are transitioning from a developmental organization into mainstream market-led organizations of the poor. And I think this is a process. When you are leading a developmental organization and when the poor are leading the whole process, and then you are transitioning into a business organization, again, which is owned and managed by the poor, it is a whole process. And I think building the business organizations of the poor calls for investments. And I think this is the investment in designing of systems, in designing of processes, in capacity building, in market research, in the use of information and technology to build these organizations. And I think IFC has been, especially the grassroots business initiative of IFC, has been surprisingly one of the institutions of the World Bank. We always fear World Bank in countries like ours, who come and somehow damage and destroy what we are trying to do. But GBI has been our partner in this whole process of building business organizations of the poor. And we today have a SEWA Trade Facilitation Center, which is a company which is owned by the 15,000 artisans themselves, who are also the shareholders of the company. And IFC has invested in this whole process of how do you have a growing and a vibrant local but globally linked business organization which is standing proudly in the marketplace with a brand of its own. And it needs investment in raising productivity, in setting up multi-skill developmental schools. It also requires access to capital, suitable market links, better terms of trade. We need research and development. We also need product development and diversification. And these are the aspects, these are the challenges which I think when the poor are trying to build a business organization of their own, that one faces. But I think in the end, what I would also like to say that we are a cooperative and a collaborative institution, and we do not believe in standing isolated from traditional organizations or from governments. And therefore, I think we believe in building partnerships, both with the government as well as with the private sector. But this is a partnership for business. It's a win-win situation. The private sector needs to invest in designing the appropriate systems and processes so that the poor can also learn to manage their own business. And it also provides business opportunities for the private organizations. However, we also believe that these institutions have to stand for open governance and also lead the way to best business practices that includes social goods. But at the same time, these are the organizations that also protect the poor from the economic insecurities and help them achieve economic freedom in a democratic community. And this is what one has to really understand, that it's a business but with a social cause, which also empowers the poor themselves and offers them opportunities for more and more employment. What we call at SEWA is the second freedom. We do have political freedom, but the freedom from hunger and poverty, the freedom of economic security, which we call it as the second freedom. Thank you.
Actually, Reema, if I could keep you on the hot seat for just another moment, I think this audience would find particularly interesting maybe a concrete example of one of the corporate partnerships you've got in the Trade Facilitation Center. We've heard so much about the need for access to market, and certainly at Women's World Banking, we find women's micro businesses really founder when they try to scale up, in large part because of a lack of access to markets. And some of the work you're doing is address that point particularly.
We have several examples, so it's a bit difficult which one to start with. But I'll give a bad example. People in countries like ours, when we hear the name of Unilever, everybody jumps, and especially trade unionists will all jump that, oh my God, you were trying to work with Unilever. And we have a Unilever subsidiary in India called the Hindustan Lever, and they approached us wanting to use our large membership base to have a rural penetration and develop a rural market. And we said, thank you so much, but we also are all producers. We are producing all our things, and we are struggling to have market access. So why don't you first, this is our proposal, that might as well first help us design our own rural distribution network, and once this network starts working, and if the demand for Unilever products emerges, of course we would be happy to partner with you. And would you be interested in helping us designing such kind of a distribution network? And of course, Unilever couldn't turn its face around, because they also saw that this is such a huge marketing network which is existing. So I think this is the 4th year of our partnership, and Unilever helped us design a whole rural distribution network. So we have salt farmers who are producing salt, and we have small and marginal farmers producing agri-commodities. We have families who are producing hand-woven fabrics. We have people making soaps and candles and all, and we were struggling for market. So Unilever helped us design the procurement systems, the pricing, the grading, the sorting, the packaging, and the branding. And today we have a brand of our own called Rudy. And we procure from about 325,000 small producers now, and we redistribute it amongst our 963,000 members. Unfortunately, I can't translate it into US dollars because we still don't deal into dollars, but hopefully in another 5-10 years we would be in the international market. But we now have achieved a turnover of about 15 crores of rupees, which is generating direct employment for about 26,000 households. And so these are the kinds of partnerships. And in doing that, now we have entered into partnerships with 6 other corporations into making electrical appliances, into making bicycles, and women also borrow loans from the banks, and then they buy these things, and then they become the local distributors. So globalization in countries like ours also brings newer opportunities, and it's this kind of partnerships which will only equip the poor and their organizations to take advantages.
Fola, I was particularly interested and found your model so very compelling because it says so many services are provided before you even get around to talking about financing with the entrepreneurs that you're working with. There's the mentorship, and there's business plan assistance. And I'm just wondering, when you're working with donors and funders, is there a particular way they can structure their assistance to you or to the entrepreneur in order to sort of support that continuum of services that you're providing the entrepreneurs?
You know, our own purpose is to get people who have been trained to remove themselves as scums of society. And if you take a normal society, it is typical that the police is less educated than college graduates. It's an average. And if you keep those people idle and unemployed, and they go into crime, the people who are going to solve that crime are weaker intellectually than the people who are causing the crime. So you have crisis in the society. Now, ours is to just create an environment where jobs are constantly being created. I'll give you an example. Of the people who have gone through the main program, 65% of them have gone ahead to create their own businesses. And of the 65% that created their own businesses, 70% have had success story of over 3 years. And the average recruitment, the average staff strength of a company that has started from faith is 4 by 2007. So each one person that was looking for work has become an employer of 4 people that may have been looking for work. Now, where can we cooperate? Faith is headquartered in Lagos. Lagos itself has a population of about 10 million people, and we have just one outlet. You know, we can have 10 faiths in Lagos alone, not to talk about the entire country that has a population of 140 million people. Not necessarily all faith target, but it gives you an indication of what the number is. Now, we've been asking ourselves the question, should we scale up? How do we scale up? Can we scale up, you know? And that's the point that we are at the moment. We're afraid of one thing called overhead. You know, you open another outlet somewhere, and then you get somebody else employed there, and you start paying salary, and before you know it, you are eating into your endowment, and the original idea, wherever it is does not sustain. We want to create an organization that is sustainable, and that is why scaling up has been a bit difficult. In terms of the existing organization itself, we need to standardize materials and not leave teaching or coaching simply in the hands of those that are doing it with us. That requires a lot of investment. We're struggling with that. We also need to use technology massively to be able to get to areas where we don't have quality people to address some of the issues that we're raising. Again, those who have spoken about technology here have given the disadvantages that we have. We don't have infrastructure here and there, and therefore locating in, we're not even rural in nature. We're not going into rural areas. But even in some of the urban cities, or the suburban cities that we may have target clients, we don't have infrastructure to those places. So those have been limiting factors. The other limiting factor that we're actively working on, we started in 2000, March. In 2002, we thought we could take over or assist entrepreneurs with some of the huge costs of setting up businesses. So we set up an incubator, let 10, 20 people come and share facilities. It didn't work. And we kept asking ourselves why it didn't work. And there are so many reasons why it didn't work. And when I was told that there's somebody here who has done incredible work on incubators, and his own incubator is working here and there, we like to partner with such people to teach us how to make incubators work. Because where you operate in an environment where there is no energy or constant energy, you'll be lucky with 3 hours of electricity in a day. You need a generator to start your own business. And we're talking of small businesses. How many generators are people going to buy? So if we get an incubator and we can put all these things there, a telephone system, an internet system with a broadband and so on and so forth, our kind of client can lower their cost of starting business. And you allow them 2 years or 3 years maximum to use the incubator to get themselves to a point where they can afford some of these things on their own based on the cash flows of their business. Those are the challenges that we're currently facing, but we are struggling. Thank you.
I think, again, one of the real benefits of this particular panel is we've had organizations that have been around for a while, and Lynn already courageously alluded to some of the mistakes they'd made. I wonder if each of you, starting with Lynn, could tell us about a mistake you made or a place where you stubbed a toe, and how you adapted the model and changed your business model and your delivery system to deal with the lessons you learned.
Yeah, it's hard to choose one mistake. I think one of the biggest lessons that we learned, and it's probably so obvious, and a lot of the things that work are obvious, but they're hard to put in practice, is really getting the trust of the CEOs of the organizations to accept technical assistance. You know, they say they want it, but there's still, especially depending on the culture and climate in a lot of countries, for example, in Armenia, in Cambodia, in more environments that aren't used to having Western consultants, it's been quite hard for these institutions that wanted to open up to actually embrace it. And what we've learned is really, you know, that there is no one right way, and you can really, you can turn things totally on their head. You know, everyone tells you you don't want to give people fish, right? You want to teach them to fish. Well, in one organization in Cambodia, they needed fish. And basically, they needed us to go in and actually do the work to give them a leg up, because they were so overstrained and under-resourced, you know, growing at 100 miles an hour, that they actually needed us to go in and actually do the work so that they would have some kind of base and momentum to actually move on. In another example, in Kenya, we're on the ground there. We know, or we think we know, that the priority is ABC, and the CEO says, no, it's DEF. And we know that we want ABC done, and that it's critical to the success of the organization. The portfolio is like the biggest asset base, and, you know, parts of the portfolio were kind of really suffering and going down the tubes, and it needed attention, and that isn't what the CEO wanted to address first. So what we did was we addressed what the CEO wanted to address first, and we did it fast, and we developed credibility, and he was very happy, and we built trust, and we could move on and kind of gain acceptance to do things which he truly came to value, as well. Other examples, when we've put Western consultants into particular countries, even though they've been absolutely outstanding, you know, in Armenia and Cambodia, they say, we don't want Western consultants. Just give us local, regional, Asian consultants. They're pretty smart people out here. We know they are. It's hard for us in the US kind of to know exactly who they are. But, you know, how do we find those people and put them on the ground, and then make sure that they have access to all the support they might need, if they need it, to be able to succeed. So, and that, you know, there's a convention, well, when we started, we were really told, how can you just go in and out, you know, sort of for 3 weeks and think you're ever going to make a difference at a financial institution? You should always be there for a long term. But think of all your companies. Do you want like some consultant like sitting in your company for a year, helping you grow it? No, you want them, if you're smart and savvy, and those are the entrepreneurs we're betting in these financial institutions, you want somebody to just come in and get out, right? And just show you, I mean, with Brak Bank in Bangladesh, they're so smart, they're ready to completely run. They're just running so fast, they haven't had a chance to focus on a couple of things. So you just kind of rechannel their headset for 10 minutes or 3 weeks or whatever it is, and they get it and they implement it. Whereas another institution where there's an enormous transformation from a non-government unregulated entity to a regulated microfinance institution, it's huge institutional change. Or you're introducing a small business lending program where people have always just thought of collateral, and suddenly you're underwriting cash flow with people who either don't have any financials or have 3 sets, one for the tax authorities and one for whoever else. And you know, that's long-term change, and you need people on the ground for a long term. So, yeah, I could go on, but that's probably enough for a start.
Reema?
Well, I think from our experience, the first is that poor cannot afford to make mistakes and fail, because if they fail, then they are wiped out completely. So I think the poor, therefore, have to continuously innovate and to turn around a mistake into, again, a developmental opportunity. And I think the biggest lesson that we've learned is never partner with a government in a large program, because that could then completely sort of paralyze. If something goes wrong in the partnership, if there is a mistake, it can completely paralyze the whole organization. But even then, we also experienced that. But I think it's the poor and it's their collective strength. And the women said that, so what? There's again, we will think that there's again another drought year. And therefore, you know, who's going to snatch away our hard work and our inner strength? That's what we have, and the know-how. And we turned it around. In 18 months' time, we borrowed from the local banks at 12% rate of interest. And all the activities have been now continuing. So I think the biggest lesson that we've learned is that it's called a constructive struggle, that, you know, you make a mistake, you are hard hit by it, but you then turn around and then your struggle then goes on.
Oh, that's great. Fola.
Okay. Most of you have heard about the Niger Delta area in Nigeria, more in terms of crisis and kidnapping and so on and so forth. We took part in the development marketplace competition that was organized by the World Bank, saying that we're going to put Faith Foundation and what we do in the Niger Delta area to assist the youth in that area acquire knowledge and set up their own businesses. Okay, we won in the competition and therefore had access to the money to set this up. And then we set it up and nobody came. And, you know, what we didn't need to do in Lagos in terms of advertisement cost, we now began to advertise. I mean, we had this infrastructure in place. We had people set up or primed to take them through, but nobody came. And we began to ask ourselves why. In that area, crime has become profitable, you know? So why do you leave something that is fetching you money to go and learn how to do business? I mean, something was easier for them than what we did. So we then learned that before we went into any area, you had to study what the environment is like. Fortunately, we remained there because we also felt that if we didn't do it, it was going to be fraudulent in a way, because we told the world we were going to do it and money was provided. So we kept it there and we kept going. And today, I'm happy to report that a few of them have started coming and is making it worth a while. So sometimes you want to stretch yourself and the person you are stretching yourself for says to hell with you. That is one downside. The second one is what I've discussed before. You know, you set up an incubator, equip it, and before you know it, even those that are supposed to, the businesses that are supposed to be incubated in there, run out before time. And then again, you have this overhead, whether it's the location or the fact that people don't want to work together. Again, it's something that we need to study to be able to understand it. But by and large, our model is working. The most challenging downside is that we're hardly ever able to support those who go through the program with the capital to drive their businesses. So there are people, even after this experience are still hanging around, unemployed, and not entrepreneurs, because they don't have the means to do that. And we are hoping that some of the ideas that we are working on now, particularly with IFC, even though it's still tiny, will assist some of them to get something started, or we review our decision that we may begin to invest in those businesses, but we're not there yet. Those are the issues that I can recall immediately. Thank you.
Well, I've got a long list of questions that I would be delighted to stand up here and ask, but I have a feeling I should share the floor with all of you. So if you've got some questions for the panel. Yes.
Reemaben must be one of the most exciting institutions in the world. The noise level in the lobby, almost this large, is so immense because everybody is so thrilled to be part of that bank. They never want to leave. It's just amazing. But I understand that you have some challenges in setting up and financing an insurance business, and I wondered if you could describe that, because that's a problem to be solved.
Do I take it now? Well, we also realized when we have giving loans through our banks, when somebody was defaulting, we always do a very thorough analysis of why she could not repay, and we found that the reasons were either she had a childbirth or pregnancy, or there was a sickness in the family, and therefore, the money, either she could not earn or the money was diverted. And therefore, we initiated a whole insurance program for our members. And we now have a package of, it's a life insurance, medical insurance, accidental, and catastrophic, so disasters. And we thought that since we always believe in the ownership of our members, we thought that we would have a company, an insurance company, which is owned and managed by our members. But the regulations in our country are very harsh. So if you have to set up an insurance company, you need a capital of 110 crores of rupees for one kind of insurance. And since we are offering both life and non-life, we need a capital of 220 crores of rupees. Had we had so much of money, none of us would have been poor. And therefore, I think that's our major constraint. For the last 10 years, we've been lobbying with our federal government to give some relaxation to this category of workers who have been successfully running an insurance program. It's a viable program. We are running it as on the same principles as a company. It's just that we want to have a company of our own. But that's the major reason that, we don't have those 220 crores, and who would want to invest in a poor women's insurance company?
Yeah, in the back.
I'm Kavita Ramdas from the Global Fund for Women. Reemaben, I was particularly inspired by something that you said that I think we don't tend to think of as going together, but I think the roots of SEWA are in labor organizing and in recognizing that using organizing as a strategy to raise the voice, the visibility, and the power of the unorganized sector can in fact be a strategy that is not detrimental to capital development and growth and successful global capital expansion, but it is based then not on the exploitation of workers, but rather on their own awareness and their own ability to participate in ways that benefit the poorest of the poor. Could you speak a little bit more to this? Because I think it really goes to the heart of what I think currently we face as a dilemma. Either we have privatization as the model, sort of just massive privatization without acknowledgement of what this does to the situation and rights of workers, or we have a sense that, well, we must protect workers from this global capital because it will automatically lead to their exploitation. It seems that SEWA has really begun to explore something that is a remarkable in-between and an option for us all to look at very seriously.
Yeah, we always believe in collective strength. Individually, poor alone cannot compete or fight against poverty, and therefore we believe in the collective strength. And when women see that their own issues, their own needs, or their own demands are being addressed by the collective, which is their own, they feel it's being part of a family. A solidarity develops, and that organically brings in more and more women into the fold, and therefore we now don't have to struggle for growth. In fact, we are trying very hard to consolidate and deepen, but year after year our membership continues to grow. And therefore we also have to, and at the same time, we also believe in economic security. How do you have economically self-sustaining members-owned organizations? And to what Kavita you were talking about is that how do you balance between struggle and development? How do you, as a labor union, organize the women workers, bring out their issues, but at the same time also build their own economic organizations, which gives them a strength to bargain. I know what the market is, and therefore I can bargain against a contractor or against, a trader who is exploiting me. I now have an alternative. I now have a choice. And also we are a Gandhian organization, so we also believe that women have to be in the leadership, but it's a family which is as a unit. And we also believe that along with organizing, along with building women's own economic organizations, technology has to play a very central role. You have to keep pace with the changes taking place around you. And if you put technology into the hands of the poor, they make the best use of it. Women have to use technology. It's not that the technology drives the organization. And I think it is through this, and then partnerships. Poor alone cannot fight against poverty. We do need partnerships, and therefore we always look for partnerships with the government, with the private sector, and I think it's through alliances and networks that the movement continues.
Ella.
I just wanted, I hesitated to speak, but I think there's an unsung hero here that people should really recognize, and that's Harold Rosen, who Fola is shaking his head and Reema is shaking his head. And I've been moved as I listened in the last couple of days, and you heard Steve Kay speak today about play pumps. I went to play pumps with Harold 2 or 3 years ago when he helped get that started. You heard him talk about Kickstart. I went with Harold when he started that. I went with him to Reema in Ahmedabad, and I went also to Fate in Nigeria, and Trickle Up, who was here before. And I was moved and listening to all these.
Harold.
Harold, stand up.
The reason I brought it up is because everyone gives credit, and they keep referring to the IFC. Now, the Grassroots Business Initiative is part of the IFC, but it's not the traditional activity of the IFC because it is not investing. It is really this strategy of working with nonprofits to create profitable and entrepreneurships, et cetera. So it's a very interesting model that people might think about, talk to Harold or whatever, but it's helped. I couldn't help but realize that it's helped a lot of the organizations that have been mentioned here and who've been recognized as the IFC each time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question.
Wherever I said IFC, I meant Harold Rosen. Thank you.
Oh, I think Harold has a question. There's no free lunch.
Yeah, this is really a question for both Reema and Fola, and one comment is about governments. Both of you in different ways, let's say, suffer from governments, let's say that in your home markets that are challenging. And I'm wondering, How do you feel sort of folks like us, there's a mentality in the development community, including in our organization, we just shouldn't deal with places where the governments behave like some of yours do. And of course, some of us say maybe we shouldn't give those governments money, but we should sure help such organizations. Please respond to that, because Fola, you've also had something to do at the national level. That's one thing about host governments. Fola, you, in your fit of modesty, didn't mention that you were part of the Tony Blair Commission. And I'm interested, a year or two later, from Glen Eagles, you having been a salesman around the world for this, how does it look to you about the, let's say, us governments in the West fulfilling promises or not? That's really two pretty complicated questions, but maybe both of you could have a go at that.
Okay. Let me start with the last one. There are unlucky people in the world, and you've got to recognize the fact that they're just unlucky. Because in Glen Eagles in 2005, on the day the report of the commission was going to be considered, King's Cross, an area in London, was bombed. And Tony Blair had to leave Glen Eagles and hand over his life's work into the hands of somebody who never took part in doing that work to sell it. But credit, the guy sold a bit, and there were two items on the agenda at Glen Eagles. Africa's one item, and the second one was climate change. And Africa didn't get the focus that it deserved. And when they got to Moscow last year, they had their own agenda. On the 2nd of May this year, we are meeting in London to look at the progress made since Glen Eagles and see how we can make it a point of review again at the German G8. I mean, this is about poverty at the macro level. The G8 involves 8 people who drink tea, say some things into the microphone without realizing that they're being picked. And sometimes, you might just be lucky that they say things that they don't know the consequence of, and then it helps the world. So we're hoping that that will be what will happen this year. But the most important point was mentioned by Bob Berg when he asked the last speaker, what about the 0.07% in terms of aid flow from the Western world to Africa? And that is where we are. There's only one country that has complied with that. Every other one has fallen behind or never made that target before. We're hoping that we'll make it an item on the agenda this year. As to working with government, I also heard the last speaker saying that we give rules, and if the government doesn't comply, we don't come in there. You have to ask yourself the question, is it about the government or is it about the people? Okay? If you, because of bad government, and that's why people like me don't wait for people like you. It doesn't matter if you've got the billions here. The millions that we have can at least start the process. And that's where we have found, talking to a Harold, very, very interesting. You want to start something to stem some disaster or stem the tide of some rough things. And they say to you that your government is not democratic. Well, what does that mean? And therefore, you are not going to be aided. It's okay. You didn't aid them. They're dying anyway. If you aid them, they'll stop dying. But you can also take the position that is not your responsibility. You've called the Global Conference on Philanthropy. That's why we're here. It would be nice if you help us do what we do. And if you don't help us do what we do, we don't have access to your checkbook, We're just going to share with you those things that we do. If you like them and you feel inclined to do them, we can measure them. We can show you the results. We can say to you, before we started, this was where we were. 2 years down the road, this is where we are. We can also say to you that, most of the time, we're only carrying compasses. We don't have maps, okay? So we're navigating. And as we come across the challenges that we face, we resolve them, okay? And then that becomes the map. SEWA now can be replicated elsewhere. But ask her, did you know the road when you started? And you need to find good people. Once you find good people, work with them, not necessarily good governments. And those people will work towards good government. Thank you very much.
We don't really have time, but I feel like, Reema, if you could just add a couple of other words.
I'll be very brief, but governments sometimes are brutal, but they are our governments. We've brought those governments. So I think, but most multilaterals and the UN agencies always give money to the governments. I think it's time that both the governments as well as the multilaterals and others need to design financial instruments which would give direct investments. And we're talking of investments, we're not talking of grants. Poor never ask for charity. Even in terms of dire crises and disasters, we've experienced that they've never asked for relief. It's we who start giving them relief, but they always ask for work. On the second day of the earthquake, when I visited the villages, the women said, "Didn't you bring work?" And so I think it's a matter of us designing financial instruments which will help investing. And it's an investing in the process of building business organizations.
Thank you.
And before we send you off to the break, I have a late-breaking announcement through the courtesy of a Google colleague that 220 crore rupees is approximately equivalent to $44 million. So that gives you a sense of how much of a license fee we're looking at. So thank you very much, and I think we've got a break outside.
Thank you.